Alright guys, welcome back to the garage. It's Tuesday, December the 28th. I think the last video I made was November the 28th. The last video I uploaded was November the 28th. So it's been a month since I've been out in the garage. Had a few trips in the month of December. I was in Calgary one week, Miami one week, Montreal one week, and then went to visit my folks and family in Ottawa for Christmas. So I'm happy to be home for a little while anyway, and able to be out in the garage working back on the 1981 Alfa Romeo Spider Veloce project. And as you can see, we've got our parts in finally to play with. So we've got, I think where we left off, we just removed the main fuel pump and the in-tank pump. So we have two new pumps to install in the car for that. And as you recall, we had some problems with the distributor and the wiring in particular. So we have a new 123 distributor that we'll install, along with a new blue coil from Bosch and some new plug wires. We also have a new filter here supplied to me by Doc. This is a new old stock filter, hard to find. But he found one and shipped it to me, so we're going to install this on the car as well when we go ahead and plumb in the new fuel pumps. So we're going to get busy out here. We're going to get the new fuel pump, the main fuel pump, in its mount that we have sitting over here, and then we'll install that, and then we'll work on putting together the in-tank pump. It's just the pump that they sent you, and you kind of need to take off the ancillaries from the old pump and use them to assemble that as part of the in-tank pump. So we'll go ahead and do that as well. All right, let's get into it. All right, we've got the main fuel pump back in its bracket with the rubber ring here below the clamp, so that doesn't vibrate. It's got rubber bushings here as well that are in good shape. We replaced both of the fuel lines in and out. Here are the old lines here, and they have definitely seen better days. So I'm happy to be changing these out. They are extremely hard and are cracked. So these needed to be changed pretty badly, so happy to have new hoses on there. So that's ready to go back in the car. So let's move on to reassembling the new fuel pump using the old fuel pump, as that's the in-tank pump, I should mention, the old in-tank pump as a guide. All right, moving on to replacing the in-tank fuel pump, and I've got a couple here on the table for display purposes. This is the older version of the in-tank pump. This is the one that I replaced when I received the car, so this is the one that came out of the car recently. Looks a little bit worse for wear. We actually just identified one connection that's already corroded slightly, so we're going to replace this connection. So here is the new pump. It's a Carter pump, so it's a good quality pump in my experience. So we're going to replace the pump, which is this bottom unit here that is connected to the top by this little rubber connector. This little rubber piece here I think is about $30 US, if you can believe that. It's a stepped connector, so it's kind of a specialty item. We are going to check all the wiring as mentioned and replace what needs to be replaced. We're also got a new filter sock for the bottom of the pump, slightly smaller than the replacement that I'd replaced about 3 years ago as mentioned. So we'll go ahead and we'll exchange the pump portion out. We'll clean up the top portion, sending unit, etc., float mechanism, etc., and we'll get ready to install this back in the tank. Okay, we've got it back together with the new pump and the new filter on the old assembly. We've cleaned it up a little bit. We've done some rewiring, so that is looking good. I think we'll test it before we put it in the actual tank to make sure it's pumping as it should. But other than that, that's ready to go. Let's move on to the next job. All right, guys, we've gone ahead and fitted the in-tank pump, and we have it connected to the hose. We still have to do the wiring connections, though. So we'll, I've got a picture of that. I took a picture of the wiring before we disconnected it, so we'll make sure that we get that hooked back up as it came off the car. So then we'll wrap that up, we'll put the cover back on, and we'll call this good. So I think what I'll do now is I will install the main fuel pump, and there's a little protective cage that goes across the top of that underneath the car on the passenger side, so we've got that ready to go. So we'll get under the car and we'll fit that up, run the new lines. I believe there's one more line I need to change, and as mentioned, we're going to change out the fuel filter at the rear of the car at the same time, so we'll endeavor to do that now. All right, we're making pretty good progress under the car. Again, this is the main fuel pump location, and it's under the passenger side, just the rear of the passenger seat. basically, underneath the car. We've got the housing installed over top of the pump. We've got the outlet fuel line installed, brand new line, up to the hard line. We've got the return line installed, brand new line, back to the return to the tank. We're working on the input line. You can see the solid steel pipe there. And we're going to connect that up to the input of the fuel pump shortly. And if you look way back there, there is where the fuel filter is installed, and we're going to install that new fuel filter and put it in its proper location. So we're going to move to the back of the car shortly and do the fuel filter, and then we'll come forward and we'll hook up this location at the actual fuel pump. Alright, so here is the new fuel filter, and as I recall, when I took the original fuel filter off the car, it actually had a small piece of foam wrapped around it where it actually gets inserted into the clamp. So what I've got here is a little bit of neoprene foam that I've just cut to size, and I've applied some glue on the back here and some glue on the actual filter itself, and we're going to wrap this in foam where it is grabbed by the clamp. So we do have the bolt here somewhere. I can't remember where it is now, but I did save the original bolt and spacer for the clamp. Here it is here. So here's the bolt and spacer that works on the clamp at the back of the car. I'll show you when the filter is installed, but I'm glad I saved that. So we'll go ahead and we'll apply that foam, and then we'll get the new fuel filter installed and all the hosing connected. Well guys, unfortunately ran into a little bit of an issue with the new fuel filter, and I'm not sure if this is going to show up on the camera or not, but here's the filter that came off the car. This is the original filter, and you might be able to tell from this shot here that the fittings are actually different. The fittings on the new fuel filter are much smaller. So if I take the piece of 13 mil line and stick it on here, you'll probably see that there is no gap. It fits nicely in the old filter. If I do the same thing with the new filter, I've got quite a hefty gap there, and that is not going to work. Unfortunately, the outlet from the tank is also 13 millimeters, so that would mean that I'd have to, if I wanted to use this new filter, I'd have to use a reduction to reduce the line down, and I definitely don't want to do that. So we are going to stick with the aftermarket Wix branded filter in the car, and this one will have to go towards some other Italian project, some future project, who knows, maybe a Ferrari. Anyway, the rear of the car is now buttoned up as far as all the fuel lines have been changed out from the trunk. Basically, you've seen that as a previous project, all the way to the fuel filter, and then forward from the fuel filter up to the main fuel pump and forward of that, as well as all the return lines have been done back to the tank. So we're good to go as far as fuel lines are concerned. We'll move on to another project. We'll get ready to install that new distributor soon. Alright, before we move on to another project, I figured I would come back and wire up the in-tank fuel pump and sending unit. So we've got that all wired up as it should be, and as you might have noticed, I've got a photo for reference here. So always take photos when you're disassembling, so it makes assembly or reassembly a little easier without having to reference a diagram. That's assuming it was working properly in the first place. Anyway, so that's done. So we'll call the fuel pumps done, and like I said, we'll move on to another. Alright, I've unpacked the new distributor just so I can get to the instruction manual. I want to see what the pre-programmable settings are in this, so we'll read up on that and on the installation itself to make sure we don't do something silly. I'm going to start removing the old coil, so here it is here. I'll be careful to make sure that we mark whatever wiring is there, so it might make it easier to install the new Bosch coil that's going to go there in its place. So I think there's only two bolts, maybe only two bolts holding this to the body, so we'll go after those first, and we'll see if we can remove that old Magneti Marelli unit and replace it with the blue Bosch coil. Alright guys, the old coil is out, and surprisingly they came out fairly easily. So we've got a big space available now to put the new coil in where the old coil was. So that looks pretty good. We'll do a little bit of a cleanup in there. Just for reference, the green with the black tracer is the positive side of the coil, and the white is the negative side of the coil on this car. So we'll have to figure out what to do with the old harness for the dual plex system. This is I believe it's an electronic vacuum pump or a vacuum module. So I'm sure that can be disconnected from there. Anyway, we'll clean this up. It would be nice if the new bracket for the blue Bosch coil would fit on that bracket down there. I have a feeling that those spacings are a little bit too narrow, so I'm going to try that out. It would be nice if that actually worked and we didn't have to come up with a new mounting location for that coil. So we'll check that out in a minute. All right, we've got the new coil installed, and we've got that area cleaned up and waxed, so that looks good. I don't think that looks out of place there. I think Doc, the potential new owner of this car, was thinking that this coil would look out of place here, and he might be looking for some other color or some other disguise, but I think it looks just fine there. I think it looks at home. So maybe it's the old German Bosch that's a bit of a concern versus the Magneti Marelli. Anyway, that is done and wired up, and we'll move on to the next job. Speaking about German, I just noticed there's a little bit of German on this factory applied label here beneath the Italian and beside the English. And I thought I'd give you a quick shot of these under bonnet decals, decals, whatever you want to call them. I'm sure not very many of the cars still have these left in this good of condition. They're actually still legible. So I thought I'd give a shot for anybody that's interested in seeing these, any of these Italian Alfa Romeo aficionados out there might be interested in seeing these original stickers under the bonnet, and that's where they were applied on the passenger side near the top. All right, Thursday, December the 30th, 2021, and today is 123 Distributor Day. We're going to install that today along with the new plug wires. We did some reading up yesterday on the programs available. Like I'd mentioned, I think previously there are 16 programs. So we're going to pick the program that closely matches the stock curve for this car. I think it's program number 2, but we'll check that at the back on the guide. I've got Alin coming by today in about 5 minutes or so. Better known as Small Hands Man. We had some problems or some challenges getting to the fasteners on the stock distributor, so it'll be good to have his little hands here to give me a hand, alongside of doing some of the wiring checks as well. We'll check my fuel pump installation to make sure they are both working. Potentially, maybe even get this car started by the end of the day. I did pick up some fuel today, so it'd be great to be able to hear this car run again after, I don't know what it's been, 3 or 4 years since I've had this or put it away in storage, so it's probably been 3 or 4 years since we've had it started. So anyway, that's the plan for today. So we'll wait for Alin to arrive, and then we'll get cracking on the distributor installation.
Little hands man.
Little hands man is here, and he's got his little hands already working in there. So we've just found TDC, and where the rotor is pointing, which points to about 2 o'clock on the Alpha apparently, and we've just pulled the distributor out. So we're not going to rotate the engine anymore. The timing marks are down here on the pulley. They're kind of hard to see. And just for reference, I've got this marks here on the crank pulley. So P stands for the TDC, F is the static timing mark, M is the maximum advance mark. And the engine rotates clockwise. So anyway, I'm going to now set the new distributor as far as the program is concerned, so I'm going to follow directions to do that, and I'll take you along. All right, we removed the little plug for the port to do the settings for the distributor, and we have our little chart here. So there are, I think there's 16 different settings. There's numbers and letters. So obviously you go by your model. So here we are, Spider 2000 over here, which happens to be setting number 1 on this new distributor. So we're going to set it at number 1, and we're going to put the plug back in and screw that in, and then we'll go on to the next step. All right, not sure if you're going to be able to see this or not, whether the camera will focus, but there's the little adjustments, and you can see the little arrow in there, and you just put a screwdriver in there and turn it. So we're on setting number 1. So there we go. We'll put the plug back in, and we're going to grease this O-ring down here with some assembly lube, and then we'll drop the distributor in. All right, so the new distributor is in, and we have the power wire hooked up. We don't have the ground hooked up yet. That's what the instructions tell us to do. So it's pretty much go time. So that means we're going to put fuel in the car for the first time. Remember, this is a new tank, or not a new tank, but newly lined tank, so everything is bone dry. So we'll check for leaks once we get the fuel in. The reason we're putting the fuel in is because I got the 2 brand new fuel pumps in, and they will overheat if there's no fuel to cool them. So that's why I want to put the fuel in, because we're going to have the ignition key on, which obviously runs the pumps, in order to set the timing. There's an initial timing LED on this distributor, so we need to have the ignition on to be able to do that. So that's why we're got the fuel out. Hope that makes sense. Make sense? All right, everything is connected up. One little snag. You can see how tight the high tension wire is, so that would have been nice if that was a little longer. We're going to have to do something to fix that, whether I just buy another lead or whether I shim the coil out a little bit to give that a little bit of slack. That's unfortunate. Of course, that's the last thing we hook up. But everything else is good. So I think we're about ready to start it. We've got coolant, we've got oil. Obviously the fuel pumps are working because we can hear them. So I guess no time like the present. Yeah. So you want to take over the camera work?
Yeah.
Let me see if it'll crank. We'll open the garage door. If it runs, we'll then open the garage door. So for success. Ready? Contact.
Okay.
Pretty good. First crank. So, well, I'm going to open the garage door and we'll run it for a while and bring it up to temperature. And we'll check that we've got no leaks in the fuel pumps and everything is good. So we'll turn the camera off for now and then we'll crank it back up and see how we do. All right, running much better. It's still idling a little bit too high, just about 1,000 RPM right now. I want to bring that down a couple of hundred RPM. It does sound good with the new exhaust on, that's for sure. A little chilly out in the garage with the door open. So I'm going to play around with the timing a bit more. It's a little bit advanced at the moment, so I think once we play around with the timing and get the timing light on it, we'll retard the timing a little bit and see if we can affect the idle a little bit. But it sounds pretty good to me. Purring like a kitten. Alright, we'll play around with the timing a little bit and we'll come back with another update. Well, just playing around with timing a little bit, and we've got it idling around 800 or so. It doesn't sound too bad. It seems to be happier, a little bit higher idle. I'm going to have to clean the pulley marks because I'm having trouble finding the actual marks on the pulley to be able to time it properly. But we've just been playing around a little bit, advancing and retarding the distributor. So I can get about 1,000 RPM max out of it. Where the clamp is situated at the moment, so if I just turn it, that's about all I can get out of it currently. Just over 1,000 RPM. And if I turn it counterclockwise, start to drop it down to what's that, around 850, 800. There's 800. I'm just holding it in place as the clamp is a little bit loose. Anyway, you get the idea. So next step is to, like I said, clean the pulley off so we can probably get out here tomorrow and play a bit more and get this set timing, or set the timing according to the pulley correctly. Alright, that's it for now. Alright, good morning. Welcome back to the garage. It is Friday, December the 31st, 2021. Hard to believe, last day of the year. Hey, back playing on the Alpha this morning, and the first thing we're going to do is we're going to clean up the markings on the crank pulley so I can do the final timing. So that's one thing I want to do today. Pretty tight down there, as you can imagine, to get a hand in, but we'll do the best we can to uncover those marks a little bit more clearly. And the other thing I want to try to do is come up with a solution to the short cable on the coil. So probably you guys are going to say, well, the easiest thing I could do is flip the coil over and run it upside down, but I don't necessarily want to do that. So we're going to try something else first. We're going to actually try to utilize the old heat sink on the back of the old Magneti Marelli coil and maybe reinstall that and see if the Bosch coil will fit in its place. So that'll space it out a little bit and should give us enough slack on that cable. So those are the two things I want to do this morning, and then we'll fire it up and let it run for a little bit more after we get that final timing, or we actually need to run it to be able to get the final timing done anyway. But let's get to uncovering those marks first. Well, we're under the car, and a little bit easier to clean the pulley under here. So I'm not sure whether you're going to be able to see this or not, but there are 4 timing marks actually on the pulley. There is a P, which stands for the TDC mark. There's an F, which stands for the static timing mark. There's an M, which is the maximum advance mark. And then there's an I, which is the injection pump timing mark. So these are all listed on the pulley here, and they're kind of hard to see. So what we're going to do is we're going to get the liquid paper out, and we're going to try to highlight the F mark, which is the static timing mark at least, and see if we can go from there. I'm not sure whether you can see that or not, but that's where they are. Maybe if I'll take a quick video after I highlight them, might be able to see them a little bit better. Alright, should be able to see them a little bit better now that they are marked out with the highlighter. So there are the 4 marks. So now we can go about our business of doing the timing. Okay, let's go back up to the top of the car. Alright, we've got the timing set. Seems to want to idle around 800 or so. The tach reads a little bit higher. I think we're about 900 on the tach. So anyway, we'll shut her off, let her cool down, and we'll tighten the distributor clamp. We might need to play with it a little bit once we do a little bit of a test drive in the spring. That's the plan anyway. It's always good, in my opinion, to do a seat of the pants test after you've set the timing. Make sure everything seems to be running okay. So we'll leave it for now. We'll tighten that clamp down as mentioned, and we'll work on that coil relocation. What I've decided to do in order to solve the short cable problem, I've taken the old coil out, and we're going to put our new Bosch blue coil in its place. Now, I was curious if Doc was worried about this Bosch sticker on here. Well, with the new bracket, or the old bracket for the Marelli distributor, you're not going to see the Bosch sticker, so maybe that's going to work out okay. Anyway, let's clean this up a little bit. This, I guess this is like a heat sink basically for the old coil, and we're going to reutilize it, so let's clean it up. Put it back together. We'll probably put a little bit of foam backing on this bracket, and we'll button it up and put it back in the car. See if that solves the problem. All right, that's looking a little tiny bit better. Still a little bit more stretched than what I'd like. I'd like to have a little bit of slack in it. It's definitely better than what it was moving it out on that backer, but probably want to invest in a little bit longer cable in the long run, just to prevent it from pulling out. You know, if the engine does vibrate a little bit, it does. It is rubber mounted, so it will swing back and forth a little bit. So I'd prefer to have a little bit of slack in that cable. So I might want to invest in a little bit longer cable for that location. Timing is done and set. Seems to be running well. So we'll move on to other jobs. All right, guys, just coming up to about 5 p.m. out here, and certainly had a good day yesterday and today getting the car up and running. That's a good milestone to achieve for the end of the year. I did have one issue to report with my startup, and that's the fact that the fuel sending unit in the tank and attached to the in-tank pump doesn't seem to be working, as my fuel gauge is still registering empty, although I have 10 liters of fuel in the tank. So that will have to be investigated. So that means that well, it could be the wiring, but I suspect that the pump will have to come back out of the tank, and we'll have to play around and check the resistance on the float to see if it's actually registering or not. Anyway, so again, pretty successful startup with all that plumbing as far as fuel is concerned, all the new hosing, the 2 new pumps, absolutely no leaks under the car. It's nice, tight and dry, so I'm happy there. So yeah, quite a successful couple days. And again, like I said, it's great to hear it running after, you know, I think it's been 3 or 4 years probably since this has been run last. So always good to hear it running. So anyway, I'm going to stop blabbering now. Still more projects to come in the new year. Nothing really crossed off on the list in the last little while, but here is the list that's left. So we'll probably start working on the window tracks and switches. Next, the quarter light locks. I did actually buy some adhesive over here, and we'll play around with that. So here's my adhesive for that, the rear view mirror adhesive kit. So hopefully that will work for the quarter lights. So we'll work on that in the next probably few days or so. The turn signal mechanism, the column switch, I actually got that in. So that's ready to be put on. I'm not really looking forward to that. That looks like it might be a little bit challenging, but we'll get it done. The tires still need to be done. The seat repair will need to be done at some point as well. We need to do a complete interior detail as part of that. And I'm sure there will be some add-ons again along the way. So stay tuned for more projects on the Alfa Romeo Spider. And before I go, I'd be remiss if I didn't wish everyone a very happy new year. Obviously this past year and the year prior were ones that we'd like to forget. So hopefully 2022 will be better to all of us. So again, a very happy new year. And the last thing I wanted to do before I depart is I wanted to thank all of my loyal subscribers to the channel. We've just surpassed 5,500 subscribers. And thanks very much for watching and commenting on my videos over the previous year. Mostly, obviously, on the TR250, it's been a long journey from, what was it, T-minus 180 something. And I think we're over 4 years now on this project. So we're a little bit behind schedule, but you've all stuck with me and all watched it come together. We've got basically one page, I think, left to do on this car. So we'll be eager to get it out in the spring. As far as the Alfa Romeo, we are crossing items off the list fairly quickly, and there's obviously a few more things to do. Hopefully we'll get those crossed off in the next month or two, and we'll return to the Triumph content and get the 250 on the road early spring, hopefully. All right, again, thanks for watching, thanks for commenting, and thanks for subscribing. Couldn't do it without you. Thanks for all the words of encouragement along the way, and we will see you in 2022.